Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, Water Prize laureates, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all, and thank you for joining us here at Stockholm Waterfront, and for those of you following this transmission online as well. Karin Galdes, Acting Executive Director of the Stockholm International Water Institute. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Now, to get this thing started, what is the role of the Stockholm Water Prize?
Well, thank you, Pekka, and good morning to all of you, Your Royal Highness. Stockholm Water Prize is the world's most prestigious water award. And I'm, of course, incredibly proud of the influence it has had ever since it was first established in 1991. Just as the theme of this year's World Water Week, the Stockholm Water Prize acknowledges excellence and innovation in its broadest sense. Over the years, the prize has been presented both to top scientists, but also to trailblazing practitioners. And both of these are actually essential for good and improved water governance and water management. Decisions that govern water must be based on the best available science and practical experience. And good ideas and practices must be shared. And the Stockholm Water Prize is therefore not only about recognizing astonishing people and achievements, but just as important is how the prize helps make this science and these solutions more well-known and more available, and ultimately more frequently used. So we need this bridge between science, policy, and practice. And I think that's the real spirit behind the Stockholm Water Prize.
Being available, being of use, that is exactly the theme for this morning's Meet the Laureate, because we're going to talk about how it affects our everyday lives, people in general, all over the world. But this year's laureate, let's give him a big hand, Professor Andrea Rinaldo. What would you like to say about the importance of his work, his research?
Well, this year's laureate, Professor Andrea Rinaldo, is really a role model to us all. Not only has his groundbreaking research shaped several academic fields, but he has at the same time always paid particular attention and interest in how these insights can be applied in real life. And Dr. Rinaldo has helped even someone like me to understand the complex interactions between the hydrologic cycle, ecological processes, and landscape evolution.
And it is complex.
It is complex.
Extremely complex.
That's why I say maybe even I have understood a tiny little bit and portion of it.
You and me both.
Yeah, a little bit. But really, thanks to Professor Rinaldo's research on river networks, we have a better understanding of how to tackle the spread of solutes, invasive species, and disease. Hydrology is often associated with fluid mechanics, hydraulic engineering, but Professor Rinaldo took an alternative approach and developed new models to describe how water shapes the Earth's surface and ecosystems. And the importance of this cannot be overstated. To address water pollution or water contamination, it's of course essential to understand how solutes and pathogens move through the landscape. To protect biodiversity, it's crucial to combat invasive species. And that requires knowledge on how they travel and how they settle. And to combat waterborne disease, decision makers need to understand how pathogens survive and spread in water environments, and how human mobility affects the demography of disease in space and time. And that is as far as I understand.
I'll share one interesting fact with you that I've already learned from the professor, is that all over the world, if you just remove the names from the map, all rivers look the same, because they behave the same. I picked up something. They behave the same, because that's what nature does.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Karin.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just trying to impress you, to begin with.
Yes.
I forgot to introduce myself. Sorry. Yes.
Wonderful job.
I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Pekka Heino, and I have the honor of speaking with this year's laureate, Professor Andrea Rinaldo. We also have with us Diane Deras from the Stockholm Water Prize nominating committee. Welcome. I will get back to you, Diane, but I would like to start with Andrea. You describe yourself as, quote unquote, a water man. What does that entail?
Well, probably it has to do with my origins, of course. No one evolutionary past cannot be free of constraints of where you started out. I was born and raised in Venice, Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness. And that makes a permanent imprinting in one's life, because there you have a feeling that the symbiosis of how the context in which you live, and the preoccupation for the future, in fact, that in such a fragile environment are necessarily so. So perhaps at the highest level of perception on what could be the dangers, in fact, of the changes as rapidly changing beneath us. So probably that's the origin.
We will get back to Venice a little later on. You're a professor of hydrology and water resources at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne in Switzerland, and also at the University of Padua in Italy. So you travel quite a lot. Explain to me, this is a bit but very important part of your life. Car 1, seat 878.
Yes, I've been commuting a lot. I'm a trained man, and for 17 years, dubbing a colleague in Padua, the 17 most productive years of my life. I've been commuting from Padua and Lausanne. And two different worlds. But I'm very much attached to the University of Padua, my alma mater, which followed me around all the steps of my career. And I'm very grateful to the opportunities that the Swiss education system put available to me. So car 1, seat 75, I keep booking the same train throughout, and I assume that the seat took the shape of my back.
Yes, but it's comforting, isn't it, to know exactly where. It's your home away from home, home between homes, yes, or something like that.
And trains are offices nowadays.
Yeah.
I wrote books on the train, actually.
Yes.
I can concentrate again.
Yes, it's lovely traveling by train. You have also described yourself as first and foremost, an engineer. You're very practical. And that brings us back to what we were talking about with Karin here, that the things that you study, how do we apply that to our everyday lives?
Well, I pretend that this is an aim I always had, but if I may, my father was a real engineer, and I come from a family of water engineers, and he never took seriously my job. So I was asking, what are you doing, actually? Dad? And he loved me dearly, actually. I did love him too. And he would ask me, what are you doing? I know, Dad, I'm writing a book, etc. How about working? That's literally what happened. He never pretended that ours is a job, and probably he's right. Yeah. We should be paying, actually, as professors for what we do.
I'm going to get back to your dad later this evening at the banquet. You have been warned.
I'm now probably looking at that.
Diane, civil engineer, also full professor of hydrology, and first and foremost, in this context, a member of the Stockholm Water Prize nominating committee. And this is important because you can already nominate for next year, for 2024, and anyone can nominate, so keep that in mind. Now, when it was time to discuss Professor Rinaldo, you were the proponent, and there was also an opponent, and I have read in the committee's protocol that it was hard to find negative opinions about Andrea Rinaldo.
Ask my wife.
Okay, we haven't planned on bringing her on stage, but maybe we should. Now, and also from the written assessment concerning you, Andrea, quote unquote, his research can explain what can be seen in the day-to-day life, which is very important to raise awareness of decision makers and the general public. Now, we cannot, of course, talk about the other nominees. That would be no, because
it's a bit confidential.
Yes.
So normally all our discussion are confidential, so I will try to avoid to give information which I should not give. What is true is that the criteria for election are clear. In fact, it has to be someone on policy or practice or research, and we have really those criteria, and the committees try to look at the criteria and evaluate. They are, of course, very good candidates, so it's difficult. So when you have proponent and opponent, I want to be more precise. It's a good practice, and I didn't choose to be proponent or not. I was asked if I agreed to do that, so I did my job. Because it's a good way to, in between the committee, for the last selected 10 or to have that kind of vision. See what is in favor and what is maybe different. So it's a process, in fact, and there is no. It's just a good way to look for each candidate. What are the criteria to really push, and what maybe are the weakness or if weakness there are. So each candidate had a proponent and opponent, and it was not my decision. It was. I was asked to do it. I did it, but of course I was as many others of the committee. We enjoy, and I don't think I have to explain a lot why we choose you, because Karin has already explained very well, and so I think it's clear that the criteria are scientific sometimes, or in case it's policy, it's different, and we were really. Interested in several things, the scientific, but as you said, it is important also for the committee, the nomination committee, to see that it is applied, because you could have very sophisticated research and then some other people do apply. You did that. You try to have application and concrete application, and also the diffusion. How you try to diffuse and give it to the others, that is very important. So the criteria are quite clear, and it's, of course, leaping to go further, to increase knowledge, but also to be sure that that knowledge will be applied and will be used by others. Those criteria are very important. That, as you said, there is a new call. And I think it would be very interesting that lots of people come, because I think it's part of the interest, and look at who were the Stockholm Water Prize to see where they are around, and I think it's really interesting, and I hope next year we will have again lots of good candidates.
Yeah. But do say something more about the application, because that's what we're trying to talk about here. That how does it apply to?
Well, there is a call, which people have, and of course you have to be nominated by people who have to explain the application of each research.
The application of the
okay. Well, the application is very interesting because, as it was said, eco-hydrology now can predict or modelize species in the water or sediment or things like that. So the first application were on porous media to understand where sediment go, and it's very complex. But now there is also about species, and on biodiversity is very important to understand because it's complex. They don't follow the water always. Sometimes they can be in a part and then go slowly, and whatever the water has different way to go from one point to another. It's not a tube, it's sophisticated. And also water disease. So one of the applications you work on was cholera. And as I always said, probably you can't avoid epidemic, but you can give the solution, or you can show how to react and how to adapt. And that is, of course, very interesting because people in the day-to-day life need to know what to do and how they can do, and it can open a bit the mind of people who have to apply strategy.
As we've said several times, these are very complex matters, but I think the most important thing is that to try and understand what is about to happen and the different scenarios where we are headed, and then when you know that, you can work out some sort of solution, like with the river networks and waterborne diseases. Are those the most important things, would you say, in your research?
I would say yes. But thank you first of so much, Diane, of course. But one important thing, my fascination with river networks starts with the work of a French engineer and mathematician, Benoit Mandelbrot, who actually taught us that mountains are no cones, clouds are not spheres, nor coastline are simple broken lines, nor does lightning travel in straight lines. We look at different eyes after 3,000 years to the geometry of nature. And there's something which, coupled to other issues, shows what you remarked so appropriately before. If you take out a scale bar from a map of a river, you don't know whether the Amazon or a creek behind Stockholm, because nature makes those shapes alike, statistically indistinguishable at all scales. And that is, it's important. It happens in the universe. It's a particular type of the assistant that it could do thousands of different things, and it do always the same, regardless of the millions of possible outcomes that you have. There's something very important, even philosophically, behind it. But that kind of robustness transfers to what happens on those networks. So something which was completely out of reach, predicting, for instance, what biodiversity seen in the river network does, became feasible, became robust. So we can put a price tag on ecosystem services, which is something which in the past hampered our capabilities to be able to to have a proper evaluation of the wealth of nations, as Landers put it. Because wealth indicators, like gross domestic products, give an idea of wealth. But unless you put together the natural capital into it, and I'm sure that resonates with the lifelong commitment of our family on those issues, means that the natural capital has to be part of the equation. And if we can provide compelling, in fact, evaluations, quantitative evaluations, that's what it happened. And as per the disease, much of science proceeds by serendipity. But we were doing something completely different, and Marino Gatto, Ignacio Rodriguez Iturbe, and myself, on a walk, getting back to a meeting of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in Rome many years ago, we realized serendipity, exactly, that the same type of mathematical tool that we used to be known and applied to biodiversity could apply to disease. So first, we could spatially explicit models of cholera were born that night. And
you mentioned an earlier Water Prize laureate from 2002, Ignacio Rodriguez Iturbe. You two have worked together.
40 years.
Yes.
I'm missing him so much.
Oh.
And I'm glad in front of Your Majesty and Your Royal Highness to mention the 2002 Stockholm Water Prize winner, Ignacio Rodriguez Iturbe, who passed away last October. Very dear to me. Easily the best hydrologist ever, in my view. Thank you for asking.
Yes, and you mentioned that you have to put a price tag on things. It's so easy to say that, oh, fresh water is priceless because you think you're doing freshwater a service, but it's exactly actually a disservice. I mean, you have to have a price tag, otherwise how would you evaluate? I mean, okay, we're running out of fresh water. How much does it cost to bring it back? It's priceless.
Precisely. For me, say that something is priceless means it's no economic value. It has to be part of the equation. And part of the equation means a solid, down-to-earth engineering approach in putting that value in. And I think in that sense, we're not claiming that everything hinges on river networks, of course. Many systems are not controlled or constrained by those, etc. But much of biodiversity, in fact, lives in the river network. And then we can start from there. Will large-scale water management plans of the future, hinging on river networks, be able to include in the equation the reduction of the loss of biodiversity? That's something very important. Can we see how disease propagates by looking at the map of a river? We can. And that's why so kindly I think I was awarded the prize, for which I'm very, very proud, humbled, but proud.
What was the first thing that came to your mind when you got the call?
Katarina called, and it was interesting because that connects to the train. I was actually in the train ride from the Swiss border to the Italian one, and for a silent amount of time, the connection would go, it's on and off. So I see a strange number on the phone. I answer, I said, where is it? Can't be, etc. So this is Katarina from the Professor Rinaldo, and then the connection goes.
You thought it was a prank? You thought it was a prank call?
What is it? About an hour until I reached close to Milan.
Was it that long?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. And then she called back.
You were sitting there sort of all nervous and what's happening?
Katarina said, Professor Rinaldo, I'm sorry we lost connection, etc. And you have been nominated for the Stockholm Water Prize. I said, oh, fantastic. I said, will you accept the prize? Falling down.
It was a good thing that you weren't driving a car at the moment.
No, that's the trains are.
That's
civilized.
Right. Always travel by train, then you won't get shocked. Now, this man is, I don't know if you know that, he used to be very involved, he's still involved, but he used to be a high-level rugby player. And yes, impressive, isn't it? And Diane, you have said that this experience actually helps in his work today.
When I made my work of proponent, I of course went on internet. It was absolutely not in the file we received, but I did that. And I discovered that he was a high-level rugby player in the 70s. So I was really impressed. Of course, we are judging science, but I'm personally convinced that that experience has really influenced Rinaldo, Andrea, in the way you work. Because when you play rugby, and I discussed with him afterwards, when you play rugby, and I have son who did play rugby, there is really a team spirit. You work together. There is, at the end, someone who puts the ball, but I mean, it's because all have done that. And I think it was probably a very good experience. And he has been using that skill to make people work together. He spoke about the 2002 Stockholm Prize, which has been always working with you and us until the last time. And I think it shows what it is important to. Science need people who are able to share, to work together, and to try to transform the information and make a transformation in order to get the point.
This was part of the talk the other day, the CV Corner here, that people from different parts of the water world need to get together, work together for the greater good. Do you agree on the analysis concerning rugby and your work?
Touches my heart. What I'm saying is that John O'Driscoll, probably, hopefully, the next World Rugby President, says something that once you put your shirt of your country, you can do worse afterwards. You can only do worse. Because, I mean, representing your country means a lot. And rugby, as so appropriately Leanne said, it's all about teamwork, it's about collaboration, it's about support, of course. But it's a taxing sport. It's not sport for the cunning. The best wins in rugby. So the issue is that the result is the logical consequence of the effort you have put in there, how prepared you are. And so is science. And so, yes, and perhaps I had the misfortune/fortune that I became a scientist as a plan B, because I broke my ligaments early on. I was 24.
So
I had to give up an international career, because at that time you couldn't fix them. So a blessing or a misfortune, I don't know, but certainly it was a plan B.
Blessing for water, at least.
Yes.
I don't know, but
yes. Diane, thank you very much. We're going to see each other tonight because you're going to introduce the professor when it's time to receive the prize.
Congratulations, really, again.
thank you so much.
Now, Andrea, I said we were going to come back to Venice. In 1966, there was a disastrous flood. You were living there with your family. How did that affect? Always the gentleman. Åsa Lindhagen, welcome. We'll get back to you.
Yes.
Now, Andrea, the flood of 1966. How did that affect your family? You need to adjust your mic a little.
Oh, sorry. Just to stand up.
Yeah.
Anyway, is it okay?
Just turn it up a little bit. No, now it's...
I'm clumsy, as you imagine.
No, I think we need some professional help. Also Lindhagen, Vice Mayor of Stockholm. We're going to talk about the water situation in Stockholm. And Andrea hasn't been forewarned about this, but he will probably join in. Anyway, you are, as I said, Vice Mayor, and environment and climate are the issues that you work with. How is the fresh water of Stockholm today? What are the biggest problems, challenges?
Well, if we look at water bodies in our city, they have improved if we compare to the mid of the 20th century a lot. But still, the water bodies are not feeling well, and I mean that is often the case in many metropolitan areas, and so is also the case in Stockholm. We have problems. I mean, the main issues with our water bodies is the eutrophication, and it's also environmental toxins. And of course, there is. I mean, one big challenge in cities is that we have many hard surfaces. So the water has nowhere to go. I mean, it doesn't get soaked into the soil, for example. It follows the hard surfaces and flows down into our water bodies and affects the water quality. So that's one challenge that we have in the cities. And also that we as humans don't take care about nature enough. We have a history of heavy industries in Stockholm that has affected our water bodies, but also now we pour plastics and pollutants, different kind of pollutants into the water. So we're not taking care of this very, not priceless resource, but actually a resource with a high price.
But it makes you wonder how and why did it get to go so far and get so bad?
Well, I do think when it comes to all environmental issues and when it comes to the climate emergency that we now have on our planet, that it's a symptom of when it comes to water, it's just a symptom of how we treat nature in general, human beings, and how we treat our planet. And of course, I also think that politicians have a very big responsibility to change this. And it's just obvious if we look around the situation on the planet today that we are not taking that responsibility in the way we should. And that also applies to water. But of course, we can change this. I mean, it's not a law of nature. We can, of course, take responsibility. And during recent years in Stockholm, we have put much more financial resources into the work of cleaning our water bodies, and also, of course, which is very important, I mean, both cleaning waters, but also stop the flows of toxins and pollutants into the waters.
Now, Andrea, you haven't been, as I said, forewarned, so you haven't had an opportunity to look specifically at Stockholm, but what would you say are, I mean, a city about the size of Stockholm, or Stockholm itself, with fresh water on one side and then the brackish seawater on the other, what would you see as the challenges to keep the water there?
Of course, there are experts here on the Baltic in particular, but I see that the Baltic and the Mediterranean are cradles of civilization. And we should lead the world and take responsibility, as you said. Time is right to take full responsibility of our actions, and those ecosystem services we took for granted for so long. It should be clear that they have a price to be paid by the community, and realizing how important it is to look at sustainability in a modern sense, in a concrete one. Yeah. So I completely agree with you, completely.
I'm tempted to say that, isn't it sexy enough for politicians to deal with stuff that is underground? Like, for instance, the pipes and the distribution of water. You want to put the money, where people can see it, that, oh, look, see what I've done. If it's down there and costs, millions and millions and millions.
I'm not going to argue with you on that one, actually. I think you do have a point. But I also think you have to enter into politics because you have a passion about something, and it doesn't matter. We need to take responsibility because we need to take care of nature, not only be focusing on getting more votes. I mean, you have to have a passion for changing things and improving things. And I think also that, especially in Sweden, we have taken water for granted. So of course that also means, why should we put money into it? We have lots of water, it's water everywhere. but I'm not at all convinced that that will be the case in the future. And we also see that when it comes to climate change, we were just talking about that before we started here, that we more and more will see that